This is for you. First Lady Zelenska, may I extend
Шановна пані Зеленська, шановна пані First Lady, хочемо все привітати вас. І, звичайно, для нас величезна честь, що ви знаходитесь сьогодні серед нас. Я сподіваюся, що ви знаєте. Ви серед друзів. Перед тим, як ви звернетеся до нас і будете виступати в такому серйозному предмету, це насильство проти жінок. Я хочу сказати кілька слів. 9 місяців минуло з моменту вторгнення Росії. 9 місяців – це довгий час. Ми всі пропонуємо вам не просто військову допомогу і навчання для українських військових.
And even an unprecedented platform video link for your husband, President Zelensky, to talk to our members in the House of Commons in the chamber. It is easy for those of us who live in peace to not want to think about what you are going through. When there is no end in sight, people suffer news fatigue. But just as we must not forget the Holocaust, we cannot deny that is happening again. We must not sleepwalk into thinking that this situation is going on in a faraway land, that it does not affect us. So your brave visit with us today must shock us awake again. You must make us listen when you say that Ukraine women are being raped by Russian soldiers and that the people's lives are being destroyed. Children are being murdered. Homes are being destroyed. You must make us listen. After all, we are you and you are us. We cannot imagine what is happening to you, but how we would feel if this happened to us. You need to keep going, and we need to keep supporting you. Because if Putin wins, other nations will be in his sights. Myself and colleagues, many of whom are sanctioned by Russia, raise your plight at every opportunity. In discussions about food, energy security and the rights of women and girls at the recent G20 Speakers Conference in Jakarta, I was vehement in my attack on Russia about the rights and your sovereign rights. And I've got to say, I refuse to sign any communique that did not acknowledge Russia as the aggressor. I made no friends, and I'm proud of that. So let us, in the UK, be your continued voice that your story, your lived reality of being invaded does not disappear. It is our duty to keep the spotlight on you, to keep shaking the world awake to the horrors Russia is committing. I know, First Lady Zelenska, it's not been easy for you or your family being separated during this awful war. We know the sacrifices that you have made to spread the message of peace and to keep your family safe. So for you to join us today takes a level of bravery, which is a hallmark of your President, of your Parliament, and the Ukraine people. That, and I say, I thank you for being here today, and please, First Lady Zelenska, the floor is yours. Thank you. Please sit.
long nightmare, one long siren, one long wail of despair. It was utter terror and honor. I stopped being a child and came face to face with the new reality of the world. End of quote. Це враження 15-річного підлітка.
These are the impressions of the 15-year-old
Це враження
boy,
15
teenager. This is not a quote of a Ukrainian boy. No, this is a lost London West End teenager. He said that about the events which happened over 80 years ago. But Ukrainians feel the same now. The boys and girls from Kyiv, men and women from Dnipro, Kharkiv, Zaporizhzhia, Vinnytsia, Lviv, Kryvyi Rih, Odessa, and Chernihiv, dozens and dozens of Ukrainian cities which suffer the attacks of the Russian Blitz. Dear ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, members of Parliament, government, my lords, and the great nation of Great Britain, Ukrainians are now going through the terror which will resonate with you. Your island survived the air raids, which were identical to those that Russia uses now to put us on our knees. We're hearing sirens every day, identical to those which were heard by the British generations. You did not surrender, and we will not surrender. But victory is not the only thing we need. We need justice. I came to you for justice, because justice will lead to the end of this war, just as it led to the end of the previous war. It was impossible to imagine that after all the crimes of the Nazi criminals, the Nazis will remain unpunished. It was impossible to imagine that the Londoners and the inhabitants of Coventry, Liverpool, Birmingham, Manchester, or Sheffield would indeed accept that those aggressors would avoid the courts and not be accountable for the terror. We are imagining the same. We imagine that we have to do the same. And we need justice for our people who suffer from the missiles. As the Nazis assembled hundreds of aircrafts to turn into horror the British days and nights, Russia is doing the same with missiles and drones, Iranian drones, for the mass missiles attacks. 70, even 100 missiles a day, and those cities who are on the front line survive the lethal strikes. Have a look what it means. This is the hospital in Vilnyansk in Zaporizhzhia region. We had the maternity unit there. Russian missile attack destroyed everything. 13 people we managed to save, but one newly born boy who was only 2 days old was killed. The next photograph was shared by thousands of people. The parents of these children had to find the gas station so that they could find the electricity, the power supply for her inhaler. She couldn't survive without it. That was during the blackout. During yet another mass Russian missile strike, more than 20 million Ukrainians remained without electricity, water, heat. They had no electricity for over 30 hours in some places. This is how it looked. The doctors were operating in the dark, and the transport stopped and communication. Our enemy wants to destroy the energy and hit us with the darkness and cold. We do not know exactly how many boys and girls and women and men became the victims of torture and violence brought by the Russian occupiers. But it's important to understand that Russia brought the systematic violence. In many deoccupied towns and villages, we find the chambers, torture chambers, which were organized by the occupiers. We have documented thousands of crimes, including the sexual violence. The youngest girl who was raped by the Russian occupiers was 4 years old. The oldest survivor was 85. These are the victims we know. How many victims we still don't know about? These are the burnt blocks of apartment blocks in Kherson. Russian army is hitting Kherson dozens of times a week, planned cruel attacks, and they are attacking men, women, buildings, schools and hospitals, which would have been impossible without the orders of the leaders of the terrorist state. In the 5 days in Kherson last week, 15 people were killed, and this is another threat to the millions of Ukrainians. We are talking about the mines. Over 200,000 kilometers of our soil are now covered in mines and unexploded munitions. When the occupiers retreat, they are leaving everything around them mined. Quite often, they're hiding the mines and the explosive devices so that it would be difficult to find them straight away in the buildings, in the civilian cars, in the critical infrastructure. For example, in one of the flats in the Kyiv region, they mined the piano. That sums it up, their attitude not just to people, but to art as well. This is not spontaneous or random mining. This is a criminal policy of the Russian state, the element of aggression and the attempt to damage and premeditatedly kill as many people as possible. And these are just some examples of the countless number of crimes, not just from the 24th of February this year, but also from 2014, when Russia attacked Ukrainian Crimea and seized it and started the hybrid war in Donbass. All these crimes against Ukrainians and humanity are born from one primary crime, that is the crime of aggression of Russia against Ukraine. And Russia has to be responsible for this. Therefore, I'm addressing you, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I'm addressing the United Kingdom. 80 years ago, in London, not far from this place where we are now, in the St. James Palace, the document was signed, which helped to define history.
Війна ще тривала.
The war was still going on, and nobody knew what was going to happen. But on the 13th of January, 1942, the declaration was signed, which recorded the will to make accountable those who were the perpetrators in the war crimes, crimes against humanity and peace. That became the basis of the Nuremberg. That's the way it looked. The declaration, which was recorded and signed by the future victors, they've signed, resolved to see to it, in a spirit of international solidarity, that A, those guilty or responsible, whatever the nationality, are sought out, handed over to justice and judged, and B, that the sentences pronounced are carried out. Ukraine, Europe, and the world need that type of justice now, and it can be started in London again, because we know that justice is one of the benchmarks of the British way of life. You have got a powerful experience of the international law and defending the values of humanism. That's why we are addressing Britain. We are fighting for justice. But justice, like victory, is not possible without allies. The President of Ukraine has suggested and announced our formula of peace. Next day, Russia responded with hundreds of the missiles. But just like in 1942, the replies of Nazis did not matter. We have to understand that together we can do it with you. Unfortunately, the International Criminal Court, which we actively work with, does not have the legal force, and they can't enforce the punishment against the primary crime of those who started the war. We need to start the special tribunal against the crime of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, which will enhance the work of the ICC and not weaken it. We need it to punish those who are politically and militarily responsible for the crime of war and terror. This is the 7th point of our formula of peace, and I hope and believe that Britain can become the leader of its implementation. To support this special tribunal, we have prepared the draft resolution, and this draft resolution of the General Assembly of UN should become the political foundation of the international efforts to punish the aggression. And I would like to address you, Britain, and you, ladies and gentlemen, with a request. We need to unite the world community, just as it happened in January 1942, to support the special tribunal against the aggression of Russia against Ukraine. I'm asking you a small favor to become the world leader in the justice efforts. This justice is not just needed for Ukraine. We need it so that the world could lead its life not by the rule of force, as the aggressor wants, but following the values of humanism. We need the justice so that the world could survive. At the moment, we can see terror online. It's obvious. We can see it live with mass documented evidence of crimes. It's easier to find the proof. It's obvious now. And I believe that London can give this impetus, decisive impetus, so that the world can become better, fairer world, thanks to you.